because I look a bit like an angel at the minute if I move. And we have got Ben from Time on Feet here, and we're just going to do a little interview about racing, running, training, nutrition, basically a bit of everything. So, Ben, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself? Like, what's your job? What's your background?
Yeah, no problem. Firstly, thanks for having me on, Andrew. Yeah, much appreciated. So if anyone hasn't come across my channel before, then my name is Ben. I got into running, it's kind of in two parts. I first got into running about maybe 6 years ago. But at that point, I wouldn't say I necessarily loved running. It was just something I did like alongside other fitness activities, things like swimming, a bit of boxing training I did. So I kind of just did running as something like once or twice a week. But then last year, I kind of very much got bitten by the running bug, and it was kind of off the back of lockdown, for which I think was the case for a lot of people really getting into running. And I decided I wanted to train for my first marathon last year. So yeah, it was about January 2021 where I really started to get into kind of training, doing running more often, and also discovered a love for the trail. So really getting into trail running. But yeah, that was where it started really last year with starting to love running and really enjoying it. A couple of reasons because firstly, I think around lockdown I was wanting to get more headspace and time away from things. So running provided a really good space for that. But also to be able to go out and enjoy nature a lot more, particularly up inside, and not being able to go out and enjoy like fresh air and as much. So that's kind of how I got into it, and I was one of those people who said that I just want to do a marathon and then that's it. But then, like many of us do, we say we're never doing it, and then we end up doing another marathon, and then an ultra. So 5 marathons and 7 ultras later, here I am.
Ah, so can I ask you like what's your job and stuff and how that affects training and other stuff? Because I'm quite a like unscheduled fluid trainer, as you have like a full-time job. Well, I've got a full-time job, but yours is a very structured full-time job.
Yeah, sure. So my full-time job is a teacher. So I teach philosophy and religious studies to sixth formers, so college age, so 16 to 19-year-olds. And yeah, that's pretty full on. So it's hard to fit my running around that. But I try to just make sure I'm kind of putting aside bits of time when I can to go out and train. So yeah, running is definitely not what I do full time. And of course, my job is nothing to do with running. So I have my regular full time job, and on the side, I'm trying to go out and train and make sure I'm doing enough miles and hills for the events that I'm training for. I have, however, like as different as these two things, running on the one hand and philosophy teaching on the other, I have more and more so found that there is some crossover between them. Which one of the things I also enjoy besides running is writing. So I'm writing articles for a couple of magazines and articles on like philosophy stuff. But I'm working on something at the moment which overlap between running on the one hand and philosophy on the other. So as much as they sound very very different, I'm starting to find that there's more threads between them. So I'm kind of looking into that at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. So let's ask. I've got some questions and notes, so I'll take. Um, so how long ago did you start running? Um, obviously you've just said lockdowns. So what was that journey like? Choosing to do it in like lockdown and just after lockdown, rather than just doing it from when you was younger?
Yeah, it's funny actually because my relationship with running when I was growing up was very different. So although I was into sport, generally like in early childhood, I enjoyed playing football a lot. Running was something I actually hated. I really didn't like it. And that was because it was something we tended to be forced to do, like in PE. It was often like a punishment. Like if you didn't do something in PE, you had to run like 3 laps of the field, or we'd do things like cross country running, which I wasn't into it that much. I was a kid with asthma, who wasn't particularly into running unless it was after. So it kind of feels strange that I'm into running so much now, because it really feels like it's flipped completely. You know, it's something I didn't enjoy whatsoever as a child. I thought about it as a rather kind of aimless activity. I thought, why would I want to do that? But now I just really, really love it and really enjoy it. Particularly for that, like I mentioned before, the headspace, but also, I think our lives are quite they're quite noisy, and there's lots of things that are demanding our attention, technology and various stresses and strains that we've got. And then running gives you the space to get away from it all. It's like, I find it meditative, that movement, and also trails.
Yeah, you're having a bit of a sound problem. Someone's just mentioned it in the comments. Do you want to try and move your phone, or like maybe come closer or something, and see if it makes it a bit better? Because it might be something to do with the audio.
Okay, let's have a look. Is that making a difference? Is that any better?
That sounds better for now. I think it just keeps dipping, but it sounds like it might be. Do you know, like when something rustles and it makes a camera go a bit funny?
Yeah. Okay. I'll see if that makes a difference, and then let me know. I can try and move it around.
Okay. So, what was your first marathon like? Because you've only ever done one ultra. What you've just done, what was running with Satan, or was that what your video's name was called?
Yeah. So that was the name of the video, and so that was my most recent ultra. I think I've done seven ultras now in total. And that video was about the Copthorne 50. So that was an event organised by Canary Trail Events. And that was definitely my trickiest event to date. It was, the elevation was tough. It was about 10,000 feet, and there's lots of steps in there too. Which was something, actually looking back, I probably would have done a bit more training on. I did a bit of hill training, but not necessarily on steps. So the muscles you work going up them and going down them is quite different. So that was tricky. And one of the sets of steps in the race was called Satan's Staircase, and so hence the name of the video, Running with Satan.
So shall we? So what made you go from old marathons to ultras? Like, what was the big?
Yeah, it was. I think when I did my first marathon, I actually got the Brighton Marathon, so that was meant to be my first one, but then it got postponed because of lockdown. And then I decided to go out and run my first marathon solo. So I just did it along Brighton seafront. So I live in Brighton, and I was just thought, okay, I'll just go up and down the seafront till I get to 26.2 miles. But once I'd done that, I thought, no, actually, I would like to do some more trail running, and I would like to push it and see if I can go to the ultra distance. So a couple of months after that, so this was in April last year, did the first marathon, and then a couple of months after that, in June, I did my first ultra, which was Run to the Sea. And that was just because, I thought, well, now I've pushed it to that, maybe I can push the distance a bit further. And also get a good bit of trail running in my training. So that's really what started it. And again, with the first ultra I did, I was thinking in my mind, like, I'm going to do this once, and that'll be it. I won't do any more after this. But again, it kind of spiraled, and I thought, okay, I'll do something else and give myself.
So what is your training plan like? So like, do you have a set training unit, or is it so many miles per day, or how do you work it around school?
So I tend to try and get a number of different runs in each week. So typically 4 types of run. One will be a speed session. One will be hills usually, and then one will be a long run. One will be a kind of shorter, easier run. So I typically go for like 4 types of run. I might run 4 or 5 times a week, and I'll also have 2 strength and conditioning sessions in there. One which focuses on like ankles and building strength, and then another which is more to do with core, arms, back strength. So that's typically how I break it down. And yeah, I usually go for a set amount of miles per week. And then I break up my runs and think, okay, I'm trying to get to however many miles it is. So I'm training for like 50K. It will typically be like 50K a week or above that, or a 50 miler. I'll push up towards like 50, 55 miles in a week. But I mainly try and focus on getting like quality training in there in terms of like variety. So having different, having the strength and conditioning. Alongside that, I'll try and do cross training. So it might be like, going for a swim in the sea, which is good, or going for a cycle, something like that. And then aside from that, I try to make sure I've got a bit of recovery time in there too. So it might be that I'm building mileage over like a few weeks and then having a cutback week. But it's mainly around that. I try to not be too rigid with my training plan. So although I might say, okay, typically I'm going to be doing this week and these different runs, if my body's not feeling it, or if I'm getting an injury, that like I did earlier this year. So in the summer, I had a bit of from playing some football. If that's the case, then I'll cut back and switch it up. So it's a balance of kind of generally trying to stick to it, but then at the same time mixing it up if I need to.
Right, okay. I think it's your hands what are making it disconnect and finger.
Okay. Yeah, I'll keep my hands down.
Right, because I think it's blocking the mic or something. Because I noticed when it's going out, it's like, I don't know. It's just the idea of what it might be. Right, so what are your favourite pieces of kit, like, and stuff you use? So do you use like foam rollers? Like what bags do you use? And stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. So I do have a foam roller. Yes, I do use that I don't use it religiously, but like maybe once or twice a month maybe. So yeah, so not too often. In terms of kit, I really like the race vest I got from Harrier. So Harrier do like a race vest. And yeah, that's a really good one. It's got some nice zip pockets in there. I'm a big fan of zip pockets. So they keep your things nice and safe. I've got some Harrier poles as well recently. So for the most recent race that was had the most elevation and the steps I mentioned before that I hadn't encountered in a race before. So got used to using the poles. But yeah, the ones I got from Harrier are really nice and lightweight. Aside from that, other kit. I tend to like having quite basic kit for like tops and shorts, because I think the thing is with trail running in particular, you can end up spending huge amounts of money. So I try to keep the things cheap that you don't need to spend a lot of money on to be comfortable. So shorts, I just get cheap ones from Decathlon. In terms of like running underwear, I'll just use like the tight shorts that you get from Decathlon as well, and for keeping it nice and simple. And then in terms of tops, I tend to use like free ones on races, because I don't necessarily think you need to spend a huge amount to do all the tops. So yeah, the things I spend more money on will be like a race vest or shoes, but the other stuff I try and keep it cheap and cheerful.
What shoes do you use? And is there like a preference to like supportive, cushioned?
So for trail shoes, I've got the Hoka Speedgoat 4s, Speedgoat 5s. I've got Brooks Caldera 5s, and then more recent, I just picked up the Salomon Ultra Glides. So those are the ones that I've got. The ones I've used the most for races have been the Speedgoat. But yeah, there's not a perfect shoe that I've found. I think my ideal shoe would probably be taking lots of different shoes and pieces. So I haven't found that golden shoe yet, but the Speedgoat 4s, I like a lot of things about them. So they're nice and cushioned, a bit of bounce on them. But yeah, the width isn't ideal for me. I've got quite a wide foot. And then the Speedgoat 5s, they're nice and breathable. I think they're good for like summer trails, and if they're flatter. But I found over hills going up and down, they're not as good because they've got such a minimal tongue. So, and when you've got that tiny tongue on them, it means that it kind of cuts into your foot a little bit more. I think overall, my favourite trail shoe is probably Brooks Caldera Fives, because they're just very comfy. A workhorse shoe. I've done about 700 miles in them. They're still going. They're not the speediest shoe, but they're really comfortable.
Can I ask you a weird question? This is like, how long does a shoe last you? Because it only lasts me like 3 months, 4 months at most.
Yeah, it's hard because I tend to think about it in terms of like miles. The miles that I've got out of my Brooks is the highest, so they're at about 700 miles, I think now. I got those last year. My Speedgoat fours are, I think, about 450 miles, and they're still probably got another 100 and 200 miles in them. So yeah, I think the shortest that a pair of shoes has lasted me is about 300 miles, and then the longest about 750.
Right. So, what is your preference for like nutrition, like, in general?
So with nutrition, I have quite a sensitive stomach, so I've had to like carefully work out nutrition over lots of practicing with longer runs. But the things that I've settled on that I put in my water are Tailwind and Active Root. So Active Root is, for anyone who hasn't come across it, it's always ginger flavor, but sometimes it's ginger with something else. So that really works well for me over anything up to 50k. But over 50k, I've found that it gets a bit sugary, a bit too sugary for me, and a bit too sickly. So Active Root, I'll go for the like shorter length ultras, and then for longer stuff, so anything over 50k, or if I'm out for longer than 5 or 6 hours, then I'd go for Tailwind. The lemon flavor is the one that I tend to go for. So, yeah, those are the two things that I find work really well in my water. And then aside from that, like the most recent ultra I did, I was eating potatoes. I made some roast potatoes like the day before. I'm a big fan of potatoes. My friends and family be talking about potatoes all the time. Absolutely love them. So I have those in a race. And then aside from that, crisps. I made some sandwiches, so cheese sandwiches, vegan cheese sandwiches. So I'm vegan. And then flapjacks. So I like going for flapjacks too. So I generally try and keep it quite savoury if it's a longer one. And just things that aren't going to aggravate the stomach too much, so not eating any like curries on runs or anything like that. I don't think you can do, but nothing that's going to aggravate the stomach too much.
Do you use any gels or like anything like that? Is it like
on longer runs, in fact, and any runs now, I don't really use gels whatsoever. There's one that I've found which my stomach can take, which is goo gels. And so if like I was in an emergency situation and the aid stations didn't have anything else, then I'd probably go for a goo gel if they had one. But I tend to avoid them just because they make me feel a bit sick, nauseous, and my stomach doesn't really agree with them.
But if anyone's got any questions, if you put them in the comments, we will come to them at the end. I know some of you have sent me questions, but this is on your phone. It's like a new thing on YouTube. So I forgot to send it to my laptop, so I can't see them. So if you rewrite them or copy and paste them, that'd be really good. So next question is, what's your best tips for like people who want to go from like marathon to ultra or just start running in general?
So a thing I would say, going from marathon to ultra is, I guess in fact the first thing I would say is that some ultras are easier than marathons. Because I think sometimes there's a bit of a myth around, an ultra is going to be harder than a marathon, but there's marathons that I've done that have been harder than other ultras I've done. So I think that's the first thing I would say. Like, try not to necessarily build up the distance too much in your mind. Like, there's other factors that are going to make a race harder than just distance. So yeah, for instance, like I did a marathon earlier this year, the sheer 42K. So it was a trail marathon, but it had about like 4,000 elevation. And in comparison to the first ultra I did, which had about 2,000 feet for the first half and then a bit hillier for the second, actually that marathon was harder. So that's the first thing I'd say. If it's going from road to trails, if you're doing a road marathon and then going into trails, then the ultra is probably going to have like some elevation in it, and that elevation will be more than a road marathon. But there, I would say just make sure you're getting in your hill training, but build it up bit by bit. So not not rushing, getting into running too soon because the muscles will be different. Your ankles will be getting used to the uneven ground and surfaces, your hips as well. So yeah, just I'd say little bit by bit transitioning to trails if you're going marathon to trail. In terms of like getting into running from scratch, the similar thing will apply, but just on a smaller scale. So making sure that you're not kind of rushing into it too soon, like jumping into like running 4 or 5 times a week, but just going into shorter runs and then slowly building it up, but also not neglecting other things. So if you want to get your body well adapted to running, then also doing the things that are going to build up your muscles and joints. So strength training, cross training, and just thinking about it holistically, making sure you're taking good recovery time too.
So, right, we have got some questions in the comments and I have got some on my laptop. So let's get on with them. So someone's asked, how many shoes do you have in rotation?
Okay, shoes in my rotation. So I think I've got 5 trail shoes, 5 sets of trail shoes, and then road shoes, I think about the same. So I think about 5 as well. But in that, there are a couple that are half retired. So shoes that I probably shouldn't be running in, which I generally would use now just for walking in. Yeah, I think about 10 in total. Which saying 10 actually, double figures, that sounds a bit good actually. I remember it's funny because when I first got into running, I said to myself, I'm not going to be one of those people who's got loads of shoes, and I had maybe 2 or 3 pairs, but then it's kind of built up over time, and I've got more and more.
I have this issue where I don't chuck trainers away. So I've got trainers. I will put it up on my Instagram a picture. It's actually embarrassing. And they've actually got holes in them. But I've actually done races in them. And everyone's like, you can't do that. And I'm like, but they're comfy and I like them and I trust them compared to like new shoes.
I'm exactly the same. And I'm kind of at the mindset as well where I'm like, if it's still clinging onto my foot, then I'm just going to use it. Then I'm going to keep using this.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. And to a point, you have to think about like the sustainability of things because we can't just keep getting new stuff just because it's got a little like aesthetic haul. As long as it works and it's efficient. Like, can you imagine how many trainers people go through in a year and how bad that is for the environment itself?
For sure. Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? Because I suppose the danger can be that you end up you could get injured if you use a shoe where the cushioning's gone. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are like too quick to chuck away shoes.
Yeah. Do you have any preference? Like, you have talked about your kit and stuff. Do you have any preference in like brands? Like, I always find Salomon's like really good for everything. Like, everyone's like, "Are you sponsored by?" And I'm like, "No, they're just really good."
Yeah, if Salomon are listening, they need to get a sponsorship for you, Andrew.
I know. Um, so, have you got any brands like that? What you keep going back to?
It's a tricky one because like the trail shoes that I've used the most have been Hoka, but I don't think I've found a shoe from them that I absolutely love. I guess I've got a pair of Brooks trail shoes and a pair of Brooks road shoes. So I do like Brooks. And I think sometimes Brooks are overlooked. Like they're not like the most, people don't see them as like the trendiest shoe or the like, the shoe that everyone's getting. But I like their kind of understatedness and the fact that you can just rely on them. That's what I found. Well, I've got 2 pairs of them, but the 2 pairs that I rely on them. Interesting you say about salmon, because I've never got salmon before because of the width issue, and like all the pairs of salmons I've tried on have been really narrow. But I found out that they do like a wide bit for the ultra glides, so that's why I bought them recently. But I haven't yet tried them out, so they're still pristine, sitting in the study. So I'm going to take them out soon and see how I get on with them.
So James Fox just asked which hill reps hurt more, road or trail? So do you prefer to do it on like road or trail?
I would say trail. Yeah, I think trail. You know, again, it's difficult because it depends on the kind of trail that you're running on. Like, is it a really solid surface? Like, because around the South Downs near where I live, we've got like some quite chalky, hard trails. And that can be quite similar to the road. But I'd say, yeah, on average, I'd say that the hill trails tend to hurt less, a bit softer.
Do you know? I do this thing when I train hills. I only train hills on trail. Like, this is like my new thing for like the Lakelands. But I kind of like come to the conclusions that the Lakelands is going to be really rough and there's just going to be rocks everywhere. So that if I train on it, I'll like notice it more and I'll come used to spotting stuff. I've not fell yet, so.
So it makes sense, doesn't it? Because with whatever you're doing, you want to try and replicate the terrain as much as possible. And for something like Lakeland, I'm guessing that's probably quite. It's not very like the trails you've got near you, is it?
No, I'm not in it. Well, we have hills, but it's not a very hilly area compared to other places. We have Rivington, Pike, but compared to things, that's not really that hilly. Well, I wouldn't say it is compared to when I've looked at other people's training plans. Another question is, what is the toughest distance you've done and toughest race?
Okay, so yeah, toughest race is definitely the one I've done most recently. So yeah, the longest I've done is 50 miles, and I ran my first 50 miler earlier this year. So that was the North Downs Way 50 by Centurion. So that was in May. And then more recently, so a few weeks ago, I did my second 50 miler, which was the Copthorne 50. And that was definitely my toughest race. To compare them, like the North Downs Way 50 was about 5,500 feet of elevation. And then the one I did more recently, that was 10,500 feet. So big difference in terms of elevation, but element too. So there's a lot of steps in the Copthorne 50. Yeah, and that was the first time I'd been out for a period of time that was like into double figures. So it ended up taking me about 10 hours and a half. So that was a tough day out, but I was really pleased with how it went overall, just to finish it. So yeah, I'd say that was my toughest so far. Yeah, the Copthorne 50.
So what is your most preferred distance? Because I prefer ultra. Like, I feel like 40 miles is where I start feeling good.
Yeah, I would say it's probably 50k at the moment. It's hard to say because I'm quite new to 50 miles. I've only done 2. So yeah, I think it might take another couple of them for that to be my favorite distance. But I like being out for a good period of time. So yeah, at the moment it's 50k because I feel a bit more comfortable with them. You know, I'd never say I feel like I've completely cracked the distance. But I think 50k is the one where I get the ebb and flow of it a bit more. I think this is something I talked about in a video on the channel recently, but you have to, with ultras, remember that low points, but they can go quite quickly. And so there is that kind of up and down. And I think I'm probably more familiar with the up downs in 50k than I am for 50 miles.
Have you got any coping strategies for them? ups and downs or the pain cave or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, so I try to remind myself that the difficult times are temporary and that they can go quickly. So that's the first thing. Remind myself of that, but also the classic of breaking it up. So not thinking about the bigger picture. And like if you're like I had a low point at my most recent race about 20, I think it was about 25, 26 miles in. And of course, the danger there could be to think, oh, I've got another 24 miles to go and I've only, I'm going to be out for another 5, 6 hours. So there, I try to think to myself, think locally rather than globally. Think about the specifics, the little challenges you've got, rather than the bigger picture. So it might be, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on eating this sandwich and getting up this hill, or I'm going to focus on getting to the next aid station. So just breaking it up. I think that's a key thing, but also really trying to focus on the positives. So actually, like I mentioned, eating a flapjack there. I try to like almost obsess over that in my mind and think like how amazing this flapjack is, or how amazing this view is that I'm looking at, and just really like hyper focus on that rather than like the pain you're going through or the
I'm laughing at the comment what's just come up. Like, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to actually say it because it's obviously a robot, but I'm assuming people have seen this comment. So how are you getting on with Paul? It's like what you get on your videos and then like you delete. Well, I delete them because so-called the really bad thing
I can see it now. Yeah, I can't see how it's like directly relevant to what we're talking about.
I was a bit like, if that's your thing when you're in pain and that's what you want to think about, good for you. So, how are you finding running poles? Because I'm totally new to these, and I've got the heavier ones as well. Is it carbon, the lighter ones?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so I actually got used to them much quicker than I thought. Like, because my worry was that I'll use them and I'll like trip over them, or that kind of thing, and they'll feel really cumbersome. So I actually got used to them much quicker in my training for this most recent race, which is the only race I've done with poles. Um, I just tried to make sure I was doing at least 1 or 2 runs a week with them. I think actually the hardest thing with them is being able to like eat and do stuff with your pack whilst also having the poles. I think that's the trickiest thing. Like it's sometimes a bit for us. Oh, and for us as well. Like filming, filming whilst you're out running and trying to hold it, and then like also having there. But other than that, in terms of like using them, like going uphill and downhill, I found it easy, relatively easy. It's not. It's still something to get used to. But the Harrier poles that I've got, although I haven't got poles before, so I can't necessarily compare. I found them great, like really lightweight, easy to assemble, and yeah, just really really good all round. Very strong as well.
I think that's the last question on this bit. All right, okay. So someone's put we need to organise like a meetup of YouTubers runners at a race. So I was actually going to think this is a bit more like private to me and you. I was going to set up like a Facebook group so that we could all like share ideas and stuff like that. Because I thought that'd be really good because they have one for fitness. So I was thinking of starting a running one. So I might actually do that. Because it'll be
I think it was Francois who suggested that from Cotswold Trail Runner channel.
Yeah, it would be quite cool.
Good,
I've
yeah,
met people members now, so it'd be really cool for. I feel like it'd just be really, really cool. And the next question is, what's your favourite shoes? So I'll go through the comments now. So if you've got any ideas, comment it before it's too late.
So my favourite shoes, my favourite road shoes. This is a bit of an out there favourite, but it was my first pair of shoes that I got last year when I not my first pair of shoes, but my first pair of shoes I got in when I got more into running. It's the Asics Gel Excite 7s. They're a basic pair of road shoes. They're like 50 quid, no frills. But I ran my first marathon and my first ultra in them. And I've got I think it's about 1,000K out of them. So 1,000 kilometers. And I just love shoes like that, like where they just do the job, they're reliable, and they go the distance. They're not an expensive pair of shoes, but they're just really, really reliable. So Gel Excite 7s. And then in terms of my favorite trail shoes, like I said, I haven't found a pair of trail shoes which is like the golden shoe, which is the one I absolutely love. But the best shoe that I've run in so far is going to be the Brooks Caldera 5s. They're just the most comfortable. Not a particularly light or speedy shoe, but you can rely on them. They've got a nice like plush collar, and I don't like those minimal collars that you get. So yeah, those are the ones I'd go for. So road shoes, Asics Gel Excite 7s, and then trail shoes, Brooks Caldera 5s.
Right. Okay. 1 minute. I'm having trouble with this app. So have you got any tips on going? Are you a downhill or an uphill person? I think we should state first.
As in, like, do I prefer downhill or uphill?
Yeah, because I prefer downhill. Like uphill, I'm like slow.
It depends on like what point in the race I am, but I'd say generally uphill.
I'm actually quite jealous because the uphill's like so hard compared to the downhill. Have you got any technique on going downhill or going uphill? Actually, that makes sense. I need tips on that.
Yeah. So for going downhill, there's two. It's kind of hard to explain actually, but for going downhill, there's two techniques. The first one is for running fast downhill, and if you're running fast downhill, I tend to just let my body go with the hill, weight slightly forward, and just so you're not putting like pressure on your knees. The second one that I use is for running slow downhill, and that's where you actually use the bottom of your shoe to slow you down. So it's a bit hard to explain. I've got a video on my channel where I explained it a little bit, but it's basically if you're going downhill, you're kind of on your toes and you slide as you're going downhill on each foot. So it kind of looks like this. You're going like that, and that's what slows you down. So those are the two things that I tend to use. The thing you want to avoid going downhill is braking with your knees a lot. That can be what causes problems in your joint. So it's trying to avoid that braking with your knees and some other way. So that friction is going down. I tend to use that instead of some like sliding motion.
Right. So I think we've gone through all the questions. Is there anything you want to add to anything we think we've not gone over? Questions?
Look, there was a question in the comments there. Up. How do you avoid chafing?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't get this, so.
Yeah, you don't get chafing?
No.
You're lucky. Yeah. So the way that I tend to avoid it is two things. I make sure I've got really good running. So the one that I use, I get those. I mentioned them earlier on, but I get those tight shorts. So they're like tights material, but they're like just shorts, and I wear those as underwear. So they're marketed as like just running shorts that are tight. I get them from Decathlon. They're pretty cheap. I basically wear those underneath my regular running short. So that's the first thing, and then secondly, Vaseline. I know there's quite a few products out there like for anti-chafing that are expensive, but I found that 50p tin of Vaseline works really well, and I just put that in all the places that need it.
I watched a video, and I think her name's Abs. She's like a running blogger, and she uses little packs of lube.
That's a good one. Yeah,
I really want to try this because I want to see if it works. But I'm a bit scared of putting lube on my feet and then like sliding.
That's the thing actually, because I think when I first used Vaseline, I put it all over my feet and then they just slid all around in my shoes. So now I try to just put it in the areas that are not going to make me slip around too much. So like on the sides of your feet, like on the front, and then like targeting it. Yeah. Otherwise, you just end up like skating around in your shoes.
Have you got anything? What? It's a bit of a weird question. This I've just thought of it, but I thought it might be quite funny. Have you got anything? What is like a running myth someone's told you what you've done, and then thought that's totally not for me?
Like any foods.
Like like when people like, oh, you need to use gels for like 5K, or you need to do this, else you won't finish. Like there's mad people who's told me if I don't do something, and I've been like, leave me alone. I've got this.
Yeah, I think the one that I had, which actually is a big one for how you approach like ultras and trail running. The big one I had before was like people saying like, oh, well, if you haven't run a whole race, then it's not a proper event, or it's not. So you have to run a whole marathon. You can't stop and walk or things like this. So I think that's the big one. Because of course, with trail running, this is one of the things I like about it. Like pacing goes all out the window. You're not focusing on like neat splits like you are for road distances. Instead, you've got to adapt. You've got to change based on the hills, feeling. So I think yeah, that's the big thing. Like there was an assumption that people make sometimes, which is like, oh, if you're doing a distance and you have to run all of it for it to be legit, but that's definitely not the case. It's one of the things I love about ultra and trail running.
I think that's actually a massive point, because I know so many people who have to walk because they get a faster time. So are you going to turn around to someone and say, you've got it in like 3 hours, 50 minutes, but it doesn't count because you walked halfway through? Like, you wouldn't say that. Or like if someone won a race and you saw them walk for like a minute, would you be like, you're not first place no more? Like, obviously you're going to use techniques what work for you in general.
Exactly, and like you say, it's a tactical thing as much as anything else, because you know that if you run that hill like a ultra, then you're gonna blow up, later on. So you've got to make sure you pace it and think about it tactically. But that's also one of the things that I really like about trail and ultra running, that it's less a pure form of running. Because if you're running over like 10K distance, like running is the main thing to think about. But with longer distance, you're thinking about running and fueling, and pacing to a greater degree, like adjusting to the terrain. I really like that tactical side of it, where you're thinking about loads of different elements, and it's not just like a snapshot of just running and pushing yourself, but it's all of these different elements that come together. I think that's what makes it exciting and get that sense of it.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important to think that running is actually a personal thing for everyone. We all do it for different reasons. So why would we not all do it different ways? Like, and we've all got different minds, so we've got to keep that, because I've got like ADHD and stuff, so I find it hard to just keep running because I get distracted. So like personally, I have to do stuff to like try to get back to running and not get too distracted by running. So we're all different, and we're all like think different. So obviously all our techniques are going to be completely unique to ourselves.
Definitely, and I think that's important to remember, like, with goals as well, because sometimes people assume like if you've done a particular distance, then the next thing is to go on and do the distance above it. Like if you've done like a half marathon, then you're naturally going to go on to a marathon, and then an ultra, and then longer distance ultras. But actually, there's nothing that you have to do in running. Like it's down to your personal preference. It's down to what you want from it. I know people who love doing track running, and they don't want to do anything else. So I know people who love like running on a treadmill, but they would hate running. some people who want to do it socially, and they're purely for the social value of it. Others who want to set themselves a particular time and go for it, and others who want to go up through the distances. And I think all of those are valid because it's what makes running what it is. It's such a rich and varied sport to get into, and that's one of the reasons that I love it.
Yeah, as well, when we're thinking about that, if we're always upping our distance and never setting out different types of goals, where you're meant to go. Like I've just done 130 miles, and there's quite a few races I could go and do, but do I just want to do that just to get the next, what I feel like is the next challenge? Because there is more challenging stuff than just the next distance. Like a 5K should have as much effort in it as a marathon. You don't finish 5K and just be like, oh, that was dead easy. It's still hard. It's just a different type of hard.
Definitely, yeah. Like one of the hardest races I did was the 10K, and a lot of I was talking to some colleagues about this, and they said, "Oh, you've done a 50 miler in the year. That shouldn't be any problem." But if it's a different kind of challenge, and one of the things I found really hard about it was that you're if you're trying to go for a certain time, which I was in the race, and it's like doing a 5K twice at like a high speed. And it's that level of like discomfort which you get from doing like shorter road distances that I'm not as used to, not as good at dealing with. I think I'm better at dealing with the kind of discomfort you get from longer distances. So yeah, they're all different challenges.
Yeah, I guess it's the same as like what you said before with sometimes a marathon's harder than an ultra. Like I thought Leeds to Liverpool was hard in a sense that I got really tired. Well, it was hard. I'm not saying it was easy, but it was hard in a because I got tired. But the lap was a total different kettle of fish, and I felt like that was so much harder because there was like hills, different terrains. There was a whole like finding where you was going kind of thing, like navigation, I guess. As Leeds to Liverpool, it was all canal, it was quite flat. Even when it was different terrains, it was quite flat, not really like stony. And there was only two bits where you had to find your way because the rest of it was just down a canal, like in a straight line. So it was a lot easier for a long distance race.
That's the thing to remember. I think like hills change everything, and terrain changes everything. So each race or event has its very own specific challenges that are important to train towards.
Yeah, I've got a good question actually. What I've just thought is there any skills, what you would advise people learning? So, like, I've learned map reading. I can't actually believe this. I feel like some sort of pirate. But in the last couple of months, I've learned how to read a map just to make life a bit easier when I'm lost.
That's something I need to learn. Yeah, definitely. Like I've got lost, I think, in 3 races this year. So yeah, I could do with a bit of that map reading. In fact, I had no excuse really. I think I had a GPS on my watch both all the times I've got lost. So yeah, definitely map reading. In terms of other skills, yeah, there's so many you could build for ultra running or trail running. But I think the one that I've really enjoyed developing has been like mental strategies. Some of the ones we talked about earlier. So strategies for making sure that you are able to deal with the low moments in races.
So, a question I've asked the last couple of interviews that I've done is, what is the funniest story when you've been on a race? Or like,
Yeah, it's a good question. In the North Downsway 50, so that was the race I did by Centurion back in May. I was at the halfway point, and I bumped into a group of cyclists, and they kind of were stopping because they were looking at all of us going through. And they said, "Oh, what's the race? What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, it's the North Downsway 50." And they said, "Oh, how long is that?" I said, "Oh, 50 miles." And I went, 50 miles. They said, "We're doing 100 miles today."
It's quite funny when you see people like that, because like people will be like, "How far are you going?" And you're like, 50 miles, and they're like, "Oh," like, and then you're like, you don't know what 50 miles is. Like, do you get what I mean? And then you get like the people where you tell them you've got like 4 miles left, and they're like deeply shocked you're running 4 miles. It's just dead funny when people ask you. There's another question popped up. Have you thought of doing a multi-day event or a longer distance like the spine of the Northern Plus? For them, that's next.
Yeah, so I haven't thought about doing any multi-day events yet. Wouldn't rule it out, but I haven't got any planned for next year. But in terms of longer distance, I would like to up the distance. So to do 100k net, then maybe onto 100 miles. But I typically follow a rule like with longer distance. So I'm trying to make sure I do like 350k. Well, I did 350ks before my first 50 miler, and then 350 milers before the next, etc. To try and build it up. So I don't want to like jump into longer distances. To make sure like I've got a good like training base before going into them. But yeah, definitely wouldn't rule it out.
So like you're just the exact opposite to me, where I did like
You just
5k,
jump in, don't you, straight away?
50, and then 100. Because I don't know, because I'm not clever.
But it's worked for you though, hasn't it?
Well, I have had quite a few DNFs, but I feel like that was more because of like map reading and skills, but I wouldn't have learned unless I got that experience in the first place. Like the thing with GPS, like you said, is sometimes it doesn't work. And I was lost once, and I went into someone's garden because that's what the GPX file told me, and I was really confused because it was like a River Thames or something there, and the guy came off thinking I was like trying to like rob his dog from his garden, and we basically nearly had a fight because he was like arguing with it. He was drunk arguing with me, and I was like, I'm just on a run, mate, and he just couldn't get the concept why I've come so far from Chester and thought I was like making this elaborate story up because I was trying to rob his house or something.
How far were you in at that point, like into the race?
I was 60, 3 miles officially, but I did about 73. I hallucinated that a dwarf was chasing there because I think I was just overtired because I don't sleep anywhere. I've had to learn strategies for like before I take like the week before I take like sleeping pills, like quite strong sleeping pills. So I can have at least like these pills are like ones what people go to sleep for 24 hours, and it manages to get me like 6 hours sleep. So it's just to get that sleep, and then I try to take caffeine now. As then I was just like the Walking Dead, like in Chester.
So have you've hallucinated, have you, during races?
Yeah.
I've only had this once actually. So my most recent race, if I didn't talk about this in the video for it, but yeah, I think I was about 8 hours in, and I hadn't seen anyone for maybe an hour or so. And then I came across these two people walking their dog around the Surrey Hills, and their dog was there. It's like a Labrador, but I looked at its tail and I thought it was like a duck's neck. I thought it was like a long neck. And then I said to them, I said, "Oh, I just looked at your dog's tail and I thought it was a duck's neck." And they gave me the strangest look.
I can imagine.
And then I kind of wished I hadn't said what I saw. And then and I said to them, "Oh, I think I've been out here too long." So
Yeah.
that's the only time I've had it in the most recent race. But yeah, a bit of an odd one.
You end up going a bit like when I did Leeds to Liverpool, I turned to this like in my head there was like some sort of like old person, and it's really bad this, but I just turned and went, I just don't want to live anymore till I finish this race. And this girl just looked at me like, what is this guy like? Like, obviously, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. Probably thought I was coming back from a nightclub on drugs, and I'm just there running down the canal, like, just when the sun's coming up. So that was definitely not a good move.
I think there are. The more I've thought about this, I think there are parallels with like eating out and races. Like, because you get a hangover from races, and
Yeah,
then you're pretty crap the next day. But also, I've realised that in later on in races, I do an equivalent of like drunk texting people. Like if I'm far into a race and I'm finding it a bit difficult, I get my phone out and I start sending like voice messages on WhatsApp to people I know. So it's yeah, I feel like it's an equivalent of like if you're out and you're drunk, you're just like texting people.
yeah. Wait, have you not had the withdrawals from Ultra yet? Like, they're the most disgusting. Like, where you start shaking.
Not where I start shaking, no, but I do. Yeah, I feel a dip after often. Like there's a bit of a vacuum after, and you feel like, oh, what's next? And often it helps like signing up to another race after. But yeah, I think when you've put a lot into it and you've trained for something for a long time, and then it just goes, then you can sometimes feel a bit, a bit off after.
Yeah. Well, like, I think it's more when you get to like 100. I did have it off of 50 once, but I start like shaking. It's like I'm having withdrawals. I'm not even joking. I like start sweating. Like, it's quite. I wouldn't like my parents to see me like that because it is quite like. Even I was like a bit scared first time because it's literally like your body's just like it's because you like withdrawing from adrenaline. So like because it's just gone. No one told me first time you did a 50 mile, you can't just sit in a car and just like relax because obviously that was the first thing I wanted to do.
Do you find it hard to sleep after you've done longer races because your body feels like it should still be running?
When I did Leeds to Liverpool, so I was up for about 32 hours. I did the race in about 32 hours, 31 hours something. I was obviously up before that because obviously I had to get there. So probably about 35 hours. And then I didn't go to sleep for about 7 hours because I just wasn't tired. So I must have been up for like 40 hours in total.
I think
Like,
that's the other thing because you were asking about like myths of running before, like any myths that you've heard about, and the one that sprung to mind there is like when people say like, oh, as soon as you finished a massive race, you'll want to eat so much, and you'll just be able to sleep very easily. But I found that it does take a good few hours before I want to eat anything, and also the night immediately after a longer race. I tend to find it harder to get to sleep. It's usually like the night after, which where it's easier. But yeah, sometimes your body's still kind of wanting to run or thinking it should be running.
yeah, another myth what's like people have said. I don't think it's a myth, it might just be like a personal thing. Like that you'd be like crying at the end and like so happy. This is probably more for like newbies on the first, because obviously it's a lot more special your first time you do something. But I felt like a lot more like 20 miles from the end. Like that's when I started getting emotional because I knew I'd been so far. There wasn't really much stopping me because I could just walk it if I wanted. Um, and then when I finished, I kind of expected this massive thing, and there wasn't till like I reflected to the day after. It was just like I've done, like good kind of thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. For me, it comes at different points. Like it can be, I get really emotional during races, and then and then towards the end too. But I think it's probably it's most emotional when it's like you're breaking a barrier, like you're out for the longest time you've been out for, or doing your longest distance, and then then you feel it a lot. And also, I think because with something like running for that period of time, your hormones and chemicals are going all over the place too.
Yeah, definitely with chemicals. Have you ever took any caffeine or anything? You didn't mention that in your nutrition book because you're not going in overnight. I didn't know if you would do.
No, so I've not used caffeine at all, but I've tend to. I mean, I don't drink caffeine anyway. My body's not very used to it. But yeah, never used caffeine in races.
Yeah. So I think we've answered everything now. I know that you're. Oh, in the future, would you consider an Ironman or like a triathlon? Someone's put.
I don't think I would. No, I talked about this fairly recently on my channel, but I was because someone asked this question when I did like a Q&A. But the thing I was saying there is that I tend to like to keep sports separate. So I enjoy swimming and I enjoy running, but not together. Not like in the same event. Cycling, I enjoy more as like a leisure activity rather than a sport. So if I go out for a cycle, I take it very easy and I don't push it. So yeah, because of that, I wouldn't necessarily want to do like a triathlon or Ironman.
Yeah, I can. I wanted to do Ironman just for the sake of doing Ironman, and then I've decided I don't want to. So me and my friend Katie are just going to do the Ironman Kids and then get the tattoos. We'll run them out, and then we're officially Iron.
Ironman Kid, how's it different?
What do you mean?
So it,
Ironman Kids.
is Ironman Kids like a separate event?
Yeah, it's like 1 mile.
I'll do that.
Yeah. So if we do that, we can get a tattoo and show everyone and tell everyone we're like Iron people. So we'll just do Ironman Kids.
And the kids part, we could just put very like tiny letters or in brackets or something. So it's so small, no one could see it. They just see the Iron Man thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think training, swimming, and biking on top of running, like that distance is just another ball game. Like you'd have to be so structured.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you're going to do a video on your channel about this. So, but is the don't say anything you don't want to say, obviously, because obviously go and announce it yourself. So have you got any like goals or like future races you want to do? So not necessarily a goal, but something you have looked at and thought, I'll do this, but it's not really a goal, it's just something you're going to do in the future, or you think you could.
So I've got 2 races booked in here already. So one I'm doing is the South Downs Way 50. So that'll be my third 50-mile race. And that'll be nice because it's like my local trails. So it means I can get like a bit of running in on the route of the race itself. So that is in, I think it's April. Yeah, April next year. And then the other one I've got booked in is in September, which is like a local race. That one is the name of it slips my mind. Bates Green Gallop. That's the one. So it's a 6-hour race. You do as many loops as you can in the 6 hours. So like a trail event. So those are 2 I've got booked in. The other thing I want to try and do next year is distance a bit more. So I am looking at the moment that go beyond 50 miles. But I'm not dead certain on which ones I'm going to do or when. But yeah, that is something I would like to do next year, like push up the distance a bit more, but also just get used to doing much more like adventure running, like going out and exploring new trails. We've got this trail near me, which is the Greenwich Meridian Trail. It runs from Yorkshire all the way down to Peacehaven along the coast from me and Brighton. So I'd like to explore some of that. There's a stretch of it that goes between Peacehaven, so near where I live on the south coast, and Greenwich up in London. So things like that, getting out there, just exploring new trails, and then trying to push up the distance a little bit. I think those would be my main things for next year.
Yeah, I can kind of get where you're going because there is a lot of like obscure, cheaper races. Like I've just done one what was £15, so very cheap and very affordable, and that was by Craig Runners. That was called The More the Merrier. Also, there's quite a lot of ones by the Long Walking Association. They're really good. They're like £14 best checkpoints I've ever seen in my life. Because I don't know how they do it for the price of that. I'm assuming they get funding from the long distance running society, like the trail society thing. But like some of them races are really, really like fantastic views, and like been going on for like hundreds of years. Like the one at River, what I did last year, that's been going on for like 70 years. And it's like a remembrance for mining because obviously there's a lot of mining businesses around here. Well, there was. Also, have you seen that race where you chain yourself to someone and then run away from the jail?
Yeah, I heard about this one. There's one. Isn't it called Escape from Somewhere?
Escape from some. We're starting with M. Does anyone know? I'm assuming someone will actually know because I think it's quite a famous one.
Oh, Escape from Meriden, I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it's that.
I would actually love to do that. I actually messaged my friend straight away and said, "Will you do it with me?"
I can
But
see actually, yeah, just a comment from Francois Cotswold Trail put it in the comments. Yeah, that one, Escape from Meriden. I'd love to do something like that. We should do it. We should sign up.
I know, but it's sold out already, so would have just signed, got 2 places. It sells out in like 5 minutes. I'm up for that. To be honest, it sounds like a really fun, challenging experience. I'm just more worried about falling out with people because you're not just running with someone, you're chained to them. So, like, I can imagine that getting very annoying.
Yeah, you got to choose the person you're running with carefully. I suppose you're going to be chained to them for a long time.
Yeah, it's not just that though. I was thinking about this. How do you go to the toilet?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
That was like one of the first things. I was like, you've got to go with someone who you like comfortable going like having them there with you.
That's the thing. Lots of things to think about with it.
Yeah, definitely. But it's something what I looked at. If anyone else knows any like really weird obscure race, can you put it down in the comments so I can like have a check of them out actually because that's like one thing I would love to do. And also, would you not do like an OCR, so like an obstacle course race, but like not?
Yeah. Obstacle course races haven't really appealed yet. It's not it's not like I'd rule it out, but yeah, I've just found other races that would appeal to me more. I'd like at some point to do like a backyard ultra.
Yeah. Oh yeah, is that the one where you go around in laps? Like
Yeah, and just see like how long you can go for. So yeah, I would like to do something like that at some point.
I would bet. I reckon I'd be really good at that because I don't sleep anyway. So
See, it wouldn't have any issues like falling up. Keep going.
I know. Right, I think that's all the questions. And do you want to tell everyone your socials or like any charities you're doing or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So my YouTube channel is just Time on Feet. So if you search Time on Feet on YouTube, then it should pop up. And then Instagram is Time on Feet Runs.
Have you I will put this all down in the description and probably in the comments actually with my Instagram and Facebook. So I guess that's thanks for having you and thanks for being on my channel.
Cheers, Andrew. Thanks very much. Yeah, really good to chat to you.
Yeah, so right, I don't know what happens now, so I don't know if you'll just vanish or if it'll take me onto a screen like before. So someone's just put check a race out. And thank you for everyone coming. If you could like the video, that would really help. And thank you, everyone. And I don't know what I'm doing. Right, see you, bye. I'll message you in a minute.